Hey folks, so for section 3, we want to keep talking about the progressive movement and what the different presidents of that era want to do the two things we've been talking about, right? Reform government, take power away from political machines, and two, make the lives of the average person a better experience overall. Now, we had taken a look at, in yesterday's video, Teddy Roosevelt and Taft, the presidents that went from 1900 or so, 1901, all the way up to, in this case, 1912. And what we want to do today is take a look at the last progressive president, which is going to be Woodrow Wilson, and what he does once he ends up in office in the election of 1912, and then carries that through until the beginning of 1920. So I want to start our conversation today with the Republican Party. Remember, there are two political parties in America. There are the Republican Party and there is the Democrat Party, right? Those two sides, Republicans, Democrats. And the Republican Party at the time had two groups in it. There were really conservative Republicans. These are people who really don't want to see things change. That's typically what conservative means. They want to make sure things stay the way they were. So they're going to want things like really high tariffs, because that's what we had in the past in the Second Industrial Revolution. Those conservative Republicans are going to support Taft, the president of the time. And there are progressive Republicans, people who really didn't like the things that Taft had done while he was president from 1908 to 1912. And those progressive Republicans are going to want to see Teddy Roosevelt come back to power. And those Republicans are going to encourage Teddy Roosevelt to leave the Republican Party and start his own political party. He calls it the Progressive Party. It's nicknamed the Bull Moose Party because Teddy Roosevelt, when they asked him about coming out of retirement and running for president again, he said, "I'm fit as a bull moose." A bull moose is a really big animal, a gigantic animal that is incredibly powerful and strong. So Teddy Roosevelt was trying to tell people that he was going to be really powerful and strong. On the Democratic side of the aisle, most Democrats liked Woodrow Wilson. Now, what's going to happen here is that Taft, he's really never going to have a chance to win. He does have the support of a good number of Republicans, but not enough to win. So the race is going to come down to Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. Now, if we were going to take a look at their ideas, their policies, what we see is that Teddy Roosevelt calls his ideas the new nationalism. And he says there's a new way to kind of be an American. Number one, we should accept big business as necessary because big business is one of the reasons why we're so successful. But number two, we do need to increase regulation on big businesses where it's necessary to protect people. Remember the Square deal Teddy Roosevelt had talked about before? Same thing. And then the third thing he wants to do is protect women and children in the labor force. Those are the big things that Teddy Roosevelt wants to do. His Democratic opponent, Woodrow Wilson, he calls his idea the new freedom because Woodrow Wilson at the time believes that freedom is the most important thing of all, that government should restore competition to the economy. We should break up big business because there's no freedom involved. If there's only one company you can buy a car from, where's the freedom in that? You should have choice. If there's only one company you can get oil from, where's the freedom in that? You should have choice. Why should the government tell you that you need to follow certain regulations? You should have choice. Woodrow Wilson believes that we should break up these big businesses and trusts. Now, in the election itself, here's what happens. The Republican Party splits. A portion of it goes to Taft. A portion of it goes to Roosevelt. And Woodrow Wilson, even though he only gets about 42% of the popular vote, it's still enough to win as the Democrat because the Republican Party split its vote. Which leaves us with this question. Since Teddy Roosevelt loses and Taft loses, what does Woodrow Wilson want to do to take power away from political machines and give it to the people and make the lives of the average person better? Let's take a look. One of the ways you can weaken a political machine, or even a big business, right, is by taking away its money. We know money provides people with a ton of power. So Woodrow Wilson pushes for the 16th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in 1913. And that gives the federal government in Washington, D.C. the right to collect a graduated income tax. That's a really big deal, because it's not only is it something that the average person had been wanting for a long time, like at least 13, 14, 15 years or longer. What that means is the larger your income tax, or the larger your income, the more we can tax you. So if you're really, 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 really wealthy, we can tax you. And we can use that money for things to help poor workers. Maybe we use it to provide better houses, or better health care, or unemployment protection. We can tax really, really wealthy businesses more than we can tax poor ones. The idea here is to take some money from the wealthy and find ways to spend it so that the poor can help themselves. Another way Wilson does this is he says, well, what's one group of businesses in America that definitely has a lot of money to play with, and when it loses that money, it really hurts Americans? Banks. By supporting banking reform, what Wilson can do is said, well, let's think about it. Every now and then we have these times where America would have a really bad economy, like a periodic depression. And when that happens, these little mini depressions, when that happens, banks often lose, especially small banks, they lose customers' savings. Customers get their savings wiped out. Well, let's regulate these banks then. Let's help the average person get access to their money more frequently, right? And again, think about this. The goal is to take power away from the wealthy, from the political machines, the really big businesses, and give it back to the people. With more money in the pockets of the people, they'll be more powerful, they'll have better lives. So one thing that Woodrow Wilson pushes for is the Federal Reserve Act. It's one of the most important pieces of legislation in our country's history because it forces banks to keep a part of their money, a part of their deposits, in a bank, one of 12 reserve banks around the country. And if there's an emergency, then that bank always has some money safely stored away that it can rely on in some circumstances. That way, customers won't necessarily lose all of their money. And the last thing he wants to do to help give more power to people and give them better lives is to end child labor. He supports passing something called the Keating-Owen Child Labor Act. However, when that law is challenged by businesses and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, that law is ruled unconstitutional, against the law, because it says that only states can do that, not Congress. States have to be the ones to rule child labor unconstitutional. Congress can't do it. So stepping back from this, you add in all the things Woodrow Wilson did that we just listed. You add in all the things that Teddy Roosevelt does and William Howard Taft. And what you end up with here is a legacy, something that lasts. We see government in Washington, D.C. now being told that it should protect its people, protect its voters, its citizens, its workers, and maybe regulate business some. Not all the way laissez-faire. We see that the economy should have some regulations to protect people, like banks. And we see government being expected to try and solve social problems like homelessness or crime or child labor. Taking a step back, there's a lot of change, right? A lot of change happens, and I think if we ask that question of can government fix society, I think the answer is sometimes, kind of, sort of. Maybe not all the time, but definitely sometimes.